Welcome into the ranking show here on ProBox TV. Download the ProBox TV app. Never fall behind in your boxing news. Well, 2024, a great year for upsets. Why are they great? The favorite always won. We wouldn't watch boxing. It's the upset we remember. When someone does better than we expected, and in boxing, it's almost always violent. Jimmy Smith in studio with Chris Algieri, joined on Zoom by Paulie Malignaggi. We're going over the upsets of 2024. Fortunately, I'm sitting next to a guy who is on the call for one of the biggest ones. That's right, it was Jaime Munguia. Bruno Surace knocked him out in round number 6. Only the 5th knockout of his 26-fight career. Like I said, you were on the call, Chris. A lot of times, one person's upset knockout is another person's collapse, but it didn't seem as though Munguia made any real tactical mistakes. He didn't start clowning and mugging and let him off the hook. He just got clipped by a good right hand. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, but also I just saw. I was going to say it on air, during the fight. Munguia just looked listless. He didn't look like he wasn't creative on his way that he was, coming in and letting his offense fly. He wasn't using his jab at all. He was really just walking in, and just throwing everything hard. There was no change up in pace. There was no feel out punches. Everything was hard. He expected that Frenchman to just fold like a croissant when he walked in there, and he didn't. Surace showed that he was tough. He was durable. He got dropped really hard in the second round. Got up, righted the ship toward the end of the round, and then from there made a tactical adjustment. He goes, I'm not going to punch with this guy anymore. I'm gonna cover up. I'm going to let him punch, shoot his load. He falls off balance, which he does a lot, and I'm on a counter. More and more as the rounds went on, you would see Munguia get him into position. Surace would cover up. Munguia would let both hands fly as hard as he can, and then he'd be over his skis, so to speak, and Surace would try and hit him with a right hand. And he's getting closer and closer. Landed a few here and there, but that last one he landed, that was a peach. I mean, behind that jab, Munguia ducked right into it, bang, nothing but chin, and put him flat on his back. And like you said, Jimmy, it wasn't anything like he was clowning or that, he was not fighting like himself. He just wasn't really focused on what was in front of him and got caught with a beautiful shot.
And when you look at it, Paulie, you always tell us on air, hey, punches don't tickle. Someone might not have a lot of knockouts on the record. If they land that good shot, you are going down. Is it an idea, kind of like Chris was saying, that maybe Munguia just didn't respect the punching power of Surace, didn't respect his fighting will? What did you see when you saw this fight?
When I say punches don't tickle, it's that, even if they're not concussive, even if they don't rock you, they still hurt, So, every punch hurts. But typically guys who don't get a lot of knockouts are not as concussive with their punching power, but they can still beat you up, or they can, they'll still hurt you if, it'll still hurt. It won't tickle. It'll hurt when you get punched in the face. Not every punch is concussive. But in this case, guys, I'm going to call him Surace. I don't know. Chris, you were in the fighter meetings. Did he tell you how to say his name or no?
It's Surace.
Your play-by-play was saying Surace, so I'm saying Surace.
We kept saying Surace because, that's how you would say it.
And he didn't want to be called Surace?
Surace.
Wow, what a traitor to the
Italian. That's what I was told.
What a traitor to the Italian last name.
Hot sauce, love it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's not Napoleon Bonaparte. It's Napoleon Bonaparte. It's Italian too, by the way. All right. Anyway,
always going to battle for the Italians. Napoleon Bonaparte.
So I'll call him Surace since he wants to be called Surace. Surace, I feel like, first of all, he landed, like the champ said, he landed a peach of a shot. I mean, he put everything on that shot. But if you look at Munguia, he's a little bit lazy defensively. Now, he's always a little bit lazy defensively. He does get hit. He's a contact fighter. But he really wasn't stepping around after his combinations. He was kind of, if you look at what he's doing there, he's got Surace on the ropes, and he attacks him, and then Surace comes right back because Munguia is kind of right there. Like he doesn't step around. He doesn't get out of range. He doesn't, he's not looking for, usually you put a guy in the ropes, you throw a combination, you're looking for what's the follow-up to keep assaulting him because he's in a vulnerable position. He's on the ropes. You'll do a, Chris, you'll know this term, you'll maybe pyramid around him, kind of pivot around him and create a new punching angle to keep attacking him since he's vulnerable on those ropes. You'll do something. Even from a defensive standpoint, you'll still not stand right there, because you're still vulnerable if you stand in front of your opponent after punching like that, especially after letting go of a salvo where, you may have thrown a little bit more energy out of you to throw that salvo. You definitely don't want to be there for the return, And Munguia, maybe it is like the champ said, champ, you mentioned about, he maybe didn't respect his power, and, he maybe felt like, okay, he's hitting me tonight and I haven't really felt it, because sometimes, you feel a couple of punches from the guy and you say, okay, these aren't super powerful, like I said, they don't tickle, but they're not really a risk. But dude, when you got those small gloves, every punch can be a risk at any given point. You know what I mean? If a guy turns over his shot, puts enough weight on it, and you see the peach, as the champ called it, the shot. He puts all the weight on it. He's actually hooking with that right hand. You know what I mean? And Munguia bends into it. He bends this way, so you actually get more leverage on the shot coming from here, and he whips him. You see this. You see the way his neck whiplash is there. And I mean, that's it. He goes down, and then credit to the referee for the KO on Surace that he must have bet, because the way he counted, I mean, dude, he must have had the under or Surace by KO. The way he counted, you're in the guy's hometown. I've never seen that in my life. You're in the guy's hometown. He did a speed count, and I mean, and Munguia may not get up anyway. Munguia may not be able to recover anyway. I mean, he took a hell of a shot, but that referee was in a rush. He's like, "Oh my goodness, I'm gonna hit this." I mean,
my parlay, here it is.
Look, again, I mean, I'm just being facetious, guys. Don't take me seriously. I don't want to, really say there's corruption there, but I'm just saying, the referee, I've never seen a hometown referee. Usually the hometown referee will behave in the opposite way. Usually when we see this kind of thing, the referee's counting as slow as
But in this situation, I think they could have gave him a 15, 16, 17 count. I don't think he was.
And then you got to go back. Remember the guy Marlon B. Right for Lucien Boutet and Librato Andrade? I used to call him Marlon B. Wrong because he was so bad as a referee. and he was during that count with Boutet. He was counting Boutet. Then he was turning around and looking at Librato Andrade, telling him to go to the neutral corner. Meantime, Librato is in the neutral corner, and he's yelling at him, "Get in the neutral corner, go to the neutral corner." And he's wasting like 5-6 seconds yelling at Librato to get into a neutral corner that he's already standing in. So, usually a hometown referee, you'll get a slow count. He could have looked at Surace and say, "Bro, which neutral corner are you going to decide to stand in?" Go, stand in. I don't know. He didn't do any of that. He was like, boom, 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 boom. Okay, you're out.
But to your point, Chris, I want to get back to it about the future of Munguia. Munguia was stumbling at the end of that count. All right, I happen to agree with you. It could have been a 15 count. I don't think he makes it up.
I can see it too. I can see it too. But the thing is the lack of effort from the hometown referee. Disappointing.
If you want to see anything about it, just watch Julio Cesar Chavez Sr.'s reaction. He's watching. He makes a face like this.
I see it on the knockdown.
And then he goes, like, he knows it's over. He puts his head in his hands.
He looks like Steve Carell in that meme.
Yeah. Nobody's seen more fights ringside than that man right there, and he knew that fight was over.
And also what he knew, Chris, and I have to ask you about this, Munguia having lost 2 out of his last 3. I know one of them was Canelo, but to an unheralded Frenchman who doesn't have knockout power. I see the face you are making right now. Talk about his future a little bit.
This really could be the end of him at the high level. Honestly, I don't think he'll ever reach the heights that he's been to. Listen, he has been one of the top super middleweights for a long time. He boxed respectably against Canelo Alvarez a couple fights ago. He took on, right away, fought a very, very tough guy, Bazinian, in the fight back after Canelo didn't sit on his laurels. Was going for it, but man, just this kind of loss to this type of fighter in your hometown, this is such a bad look for him. And to scratch back from this, long road ahead. And like I said, I'm not sure he can ever get back to these heights.
Well, when it comes to showcase fights, usually in your hometown, that's exactly what we're dealing with. So let's talk about another upset in the hometown. Paulie, I'll start with you. There's the fight, and then there's the moment. Subriel Matias fighting in his hometown, right, of course, touching gloves with Felix Trinidad, heading to the ring. He was eaten up by Liam Paro, outboxed throughout that fight. Paulie, was it one of those things of maybe the moment and the hometown and the showcase being a little too much for you?
I hate to say the word too much, but sometimes too much can be the distractions, that seems to be, again, I don't want to take away from Paro, but then Paro comes right back and loses the title to Richardson Hitchens. It was a good fighter. Listen, me and Chris know Hitchens since he's a kid. I mean, Hitchens always could fight. So I'm not saying that losing the title to Hitchens is a negative, but I'm saying, you expect a guy who just beat the quote-unquote boogeyman of the division to have been able to last a little longer as champion, especially not even having to rematch Matias, and especially the way we were looking at Matias. Matias was a scary guy. He could press you. He could bring a pace on you, put a pace on you, put some heavy punches on you and put them in numbers, really prevented you from escaping. I mean, for lack of a better example, he actually killed a guy in the ring, So, everything was scary about Matias in this weight class. He was really a boogeyman. And, I don't know, man. It's like he maybe lost himself on the way to the ring. So I really believe you can't lose yourself on the way to the ring. There's been fights where on my way to the ring, I had to actually make some mental adjustments to my my mentality going to the ring. Dude, sometimes you start to feel like it's a party. You know what I mean? Like you're going to the ring. It's a crazy.
It's a coronation. It's
Yeah.
I'm showing up. I'm getting my crown. Yeah.
Especially when you walk the ring as a champion, where there's a lot of fanfare and there's you can almost
It's the hometown curse. That's why so many fighters fall off when they fight at home.
Yeah, you can almost feel like you're heading into a party, and then all of a sudden you get into the ring, everybody leaves the ring, and it hits you out of nowhere. Like, dude, I got to fight right now. So I don't know if that happened for sure to Matias, if that kind of thing, but I'll tell you what, it can happen, and you have to like sort of readjust quickly. And I'm not sure Matias ever got out of that mentality where, listen, he's at home, this is a party, Paro's just there to get beat. And Paro didn't get the memo. When you're defending a world championship, rarely will your opponent ever get that memo, because that's the moment of their life. Just like it was the moment of your life and that you won the title, it's always the moment of your opponent's life when they're trying to take the title from you. So they're never going to get that memo. They're going to fight their hungriest fight of their life. So that's the way it came out for Paro. He's now an ex-champion himself, as we saw him lose to Hitchens, but nonetheless, and that was actually an odds-on slight upset there with the odds makers as well. Speaking of upsets, but certainly a super shock. Nobody saw the Matias loss coming. As a matter of fact, I firmly believe the big names didn't want to fight him, and that's why it ended up being Paro that fought Matias, because Matias would have fought all the big names. Nobody wanted to go near him, and then it ended up being Paro who gets him, and Paro gets to upset him.
Here's the question I have for you, Chris. The shine off someone like Munguia or someone like Matias is, if you can't be consistent, if we see a hole in your game big enough for this kind of upset to happen, does the rest of the division go, you lack the consistency to be great? Because you talk about the hometown crowd disadvantage in a sense. The all-time greats, consistent. They were always really, really good, if not great, every time they step in the ring. And as soon as you show the rest of the Sharks that you could be weak sometimes, is it over for you? That's a question I have about the future of these guys. So
the difference between the best and the rest is what you just said. It's up here, and it's being consistent. It's being able to show up. It's being able to leave the issues at the door. When I say the hometown curse, I'm not talking about curse like it's bad luck. I mean that everything leading up to that.
You behave differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're at home. You're comfortable. You got people asking you for tickets. Everyone's your ticker tape parade. It makes you feel good.
You don't feel the risk.
You don't feel the risk. You don't feel like you're in danger.
Everybody's making you feel like it's your party.
Yes, exactly. This is my coming out party. This is my event. You're coming to my. I'm gonna. We're gonna play nice. No. That guy's coming to knock you off your high horse. And I think that's what happened in this situation. But Champ, you made a good point about Liam Paro, the fact that he loses his next fight, and you brought this up with Munguia. It's not just about losing, and it's not just about being upset. The after effects is who you lost to and how. And for Munguia, obviously, he lost to somebody that's completely unheralded, and he got iced with an overhand right. So, one guy, one punch gets KO'd by a guy who can't punch. So that's like adding insult to injury. Now with Paro,
that's the Steve Carell face.
Yes.
Yes.
But so when with Paro and Matias, listen, I was always critical of Matias. I thought he was one-dimensional. I thought he was a flat-footed guy. Yes, everything you said about him, Champ, boogeyman, comes forward, very, very dangerous puncher, puts a crazy pace on you. But the guy gets hit. He's there. He can be outmaneuvered in footwork-wise. I didn't think Paro was going to be the guy to do that, but then Paro showed up and he boxed well, and he did it. But the fact that Paro couldn't be consistent and hold on to the title, like you said, Champ, again, losing to Hitchinson is no knock. But like, if you're the guy knocking off the guy, you should probably hold on to the title for a little bit. And I think it's just all in hindsight. You kind of look at this and you're like, yeah, I mean, maybe Matias wasn't that guy. Maybe Paro's not that guy. So that's where the upset comes in, because everybody was thinking Matias was this guy, and then you bring in a guy who isn't the guy, and he beats you. So it's who you lose to and how that matters.
And let's turn this one around. I love this segue here, because when you talk about consistency, you guys all, I want to give my co-hosts here a lot of credit. The champs had this one pegged a little bit. Rayo Valenzuela versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Both of you said Rayo has what it takes. If he can be consistent with that for 12 rounds, he can beat Isaac Pitbull Cruz. So it's one of those things where we talk about consistency. Rayo Valenzuela, in another huge upset, had that consistency. Chris, why didn't we think it would happen in that fight, and why did it turn out to be the upset?
So this was basically just looking at where these fighters were in their careers. I mean, Cruz was riding high. He had that huge knockout of Rolly Romero. He was being anointed like early as the next Mexican star. Like, look at this guy, Rayo Valenzuela. had a couple losses at 135, at 130, was coming up in weight. You know, he had been stopped by De Los Santos. So kind of written off, only has sub 15 fights. So like, there's all these things against Rayo Valenzuela. But to your point about how what my champ and I were saying, X's and O's, this is a fight for Rayo to win. He just had to show up. He's been able to do it. Just like you said, we've never seen him do it consistently for 12 rounds. He put up a great game plan with Robert Garcia. He had excellent sparring, of course, over there, and went out there and shined. And he showed that, listen, I am that guy. And Isaac Cruz isn't. So I don't think Isaac Cruz ever beats Rayo. I don't think he ever beats a tall, long lefty who can box and punch. I think it's just a bad style matchup, especially at, at this weight class. I'm sorry, 135 he got stopped, and then this fight was at 140. I said earlier, but in terms of this being a big upset, yes, I think on paper and based on what people were saying about both fighters at that time, huge upset. But X's and O's, anyone who knows boxing, not that surprising.
Now, do you think more, Paulie, of Rayo Valenzuela? Because Isaac Pitbull Cruz and his management said, we want none of a rematch. We're going to have exciting fights. We don't believe a rematch with this guy is exciting, i.e. we don't think we can beat him. What's your thought on that when you talk about where can the guy who won, who pulled the upset go? Rayo, if he sticks to this and is consistent, he could be an excellent champion. What's your thought on it?
Yeah, I think that they were probably just better off not even talking about whether they wanted a rematch or not. I think you don't have to say you don't want a rematch when the guy takes a title from you. Like, I don't know, like as the new champion, you can say other things. I don't know. In those situations, unless there was some sort of a mandatory rematch where it has to be honored, you don't have to talk. I think they only made themselves look bad by saying, "Oh, we don't want a rematch." If they would have said nothing and just moved on, nobody would have talked about a rematch. I don't know.
They said the quiet part out loud.
Adrian Broner took my title in the welterweight division. It was close. It was competitive. I was dying for a rematch. He just didn't acknowledge it. You know what I mean? It's all. And when you don't acknowledge it, you're the champion. So when you don't acknowledge it, you can just go your way. Even Pitbull in this case, you're not the champion anymore, but you're still a big name. So you don't even have to acknowledge that. You can say, "Oh, I'll chase another belt," and that's it. You look good in your next fight. People will forget the Rayo fight to begin with. If you find the fight where you look good in. But if you acknowledge it, you make us say what we just said. Oh, well, maybe you're just looking to avoid it now, and maybe you don't. That style doesn't suit you well. I think them even saying anything was a total was an error on their part, because now you make people start to question your credibility in that regard.
They acknowledged the elephant in the room. They didn't need to. And they pointed out.
Yeah, exactly. You never want to do that. For branding reasons and for image reasons. But going back to with Rayo, admittedly, I didn't pick him because I didn't think he could be that disciplined. Rayo has an excellent reputation to be a very exciting fighter. So I thought to myself, he's too exciting for his own good against a guy like Pitbull, who can only beat you in an exciting fight, And so I thought to myself, I don't know. We do see the physical advantages he has, but I just don't see him actually staying disciplined for that long of a period of time. I hadn't seen it in his career to that point. I've always seen him fall into the battle, and start to battle against guys. We saw De Los Santos actually. De Los Santos, you needed a really, really disciplined performance against De Los Santos. De Los Santos is not easy to look good against. Mind you, nobody's talking about De Los Santos. He made Shakur Stevenson look kind of bad in losing to Shakur, even though if Shakur dominated him. He has a win over Rayo. Nobody wants to see De Los Santos. Gervonta Davis wants to retire, but he doesn't want to see what it's on to see De Los Santos. Nor has he ever fought any other guys that are that tough to begin with, right? Or that many that tough guys. All right, don't shoot me for over exaggerating. But nonetheless, going back to Rayo, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Going back to Rayo, he put on a brilliant performance, disciplined the whole time, and you're like, wow, it's like, I didn't know this guy could do this. Now, can he do this against a higher level? I'm not sure. Like, for example, speaking of a Gervonta Davis, could he do it against a Gervonta Davis? I would question him again. I would say, okay, he can box against a Pitbull Cruz, but I don't know if he can box against a guy with the skill set of a Gervonta Davis. I'm not sure about that, So I don't know, man. But it'd be an interesting fight because Rayo is 5'10", and he brings that level to him, and he also will fight you if he has to, So when Gervonta does up the pace, which he certainly. There comes a point in the fight where Gervonta always ups the pace. Rayo will gladly oblige in some ways, which could be to his own detriment. But nonetheless, he's going to be an exciting champion. I'm not sure he's going to last that long, but I think he's going to be exciting, and he's going to be exciting to watch. And by being a champion, even if you're an ex-champion, you remain in that circle, so to speak, that circle of trust, that circle of that club of money fighters. So you'll get other chances. So I think it was a job well done, and it was certainly an upset to talk about in 2024.
One of the biggest upsets in terms of the stage, in terms of the weight class, in terms of the size of these gentlemen. You got to go with Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois. Another case of essentially a homecoming fight, simply because Anthony Joshua, huge in London, a lot of ways to say that, and in a gigantic fight on the biggest possible stage. Dubois on him from start to finish, getting the 5th round KO. Chris, when you look at this knockout, what stands out to you about all the elements that could have taken place? Homecoming, big guy who has shown some vulnerabilities in the past. What are your thoughts on the knockout?
So when I think about this fight, I think about how biased I am, because I just love Anthony Joshua. And like, as the fight's playing out, I'm like, duh, of course this is the way this is going to go. Because Daniel Dubois, leading up to the Anthony Joshua fight, was looking like the guy he was supposed to be. Where the hype train, everyone was so hyped about him because of his physicality, his punch, his durability, all of it. The size, he had it. Good super heavyweight size guy, can really, really punch, is super durable. But he didn't live up to expectations. You know, he had the Joe Joyce fight where he quote unquote, people said he quit because of an eye injury. Listen, eye injuries are terrible to deal with. So I actually went to bat for him, being like, hey, listen, you don't know what eye injuries are like. He's getting hit a lot. Then he falls short against Usyk, and that one I actually do think he quit. I think he mentally broke in that fight and wanted out. But after that, he came back and was getting good performance after good performance. Jerome Miller, Ergovich, was looking like the guy that we always thought he was going to be. So going into the Joshua fight, tons of momentum. Tons of momentum. And yes, Joshua, to a degree, had some momentum as well. He had come back and he had knocked out Otto Wallin. He had one-punch KO'd an MMA fighter in Francis Ngannou, who had given Tyson Fury fits, but it doesn't matter. You're supposed to knock that guy out. So he had these 2 wins that looked good, but if you look beyond the numbers of both guys, it really was, Dubois who was riding the momentum train going into the fight. And just based on what we've seen from Joshua being a little fragile, especially to the chin as of late, getting hurt early with a guy as strong as Dubois. As I'm watching, I'm like, man, of course this is what happened. I can't believe I picked Joshua. I just picked Joshua because I like him. I like the guy. I like everything about him. I like the way he fights. I was starting to believe the hype train again. I'm like, Joshua's back. He's mean. He's with Ben Davison. They're figuring things out. We're going to get the Joshua of old. And then we got Joshua's Joshua, and he's still human. And Dubois did what he did and had a fantastic, incredible upset, but great knockout as well.
Yeah, when you look at it, Paulie, in round number 5, when Dubois actually got the knockout, was when it looked like the tide might be turning just a little bit, even though Anthony Joshua had taken a lot of damage up to this point. He was kind of turned the fight around and got absolutely destroyed. He did show guts in that 5th round. Does that count for anything when we talk about his future, if there is one?
I think Joshua has always had character. I don't think that's something that's got to be questioned. He's had obviously some inconsistent nights for sure in his career, but I think he's shown enough times that he's willing to go through fire to where you can excuse the times where you may question his character. I think the reputation of Joshua is that he does have character, and he showed that. He showed that in the Dubois fight as well, because that was a hellacious beginning to that fight, and he was he had to get up off the canvas several times, and he had to just deal with all the adversity he was dealing with. And again, I mean, we talk about, that the crowd can make you feel like it's a party. With Anthony Joshua, it's always a party. So he's always got to get focused and honed in on the opposition, because anytime he fights in the UK, I mean, it's basically a huge party atmosphere in the stadium or in the arena. He just has that. He just brings out the fanfare like no other fighter of this generation, in my opinion. So I think it's also why we Chris and I may have started leaning towards Joshua. You start to see a couple of positive things, and you start to say, wow, you know what, this is the guy that I saw, because Joshua has shown flashes of brilliance in his career, of greatness in his career, both character wise and excitement wise, and this image and boxing wise. He's an Olympic gold medalist as well. So you start to think to yourself, oh man, he can summon it back. So the fights with Ngannou and Wallin, looking back, okay, you can hindsight is always 2020, but in the moment, he was doing some good things, and he set up Ngannou lovely. Granted, okay, Ngannou is a basic boxer, but he still set him up lovely for a one-punch KO. And Wallin was still a guy who had made everybody look bad, and Joshua dominated him. So the technical stuff with Ben Davison, I bought into it. I do think it was helping, but on the night with Dubois, what does Dubois do? Dubois backs him up. He takes it to him and he backs him up. And remember, I always say good punchers are not as good when they get backed up. when you get older, you don't have as much emphasis on holding your ground. You know, you're fighting your way through difficult times. You know, at least for most of us that when we get older, you sort of look to old man it. You try to get through the fight and try to use your veteran experience and try to trouble the guy in different ways. But when you got a guy with the youthful enthusiasm of Dubois, he was going to back you up, and that's it. And Joshua sort of went into flight a lot of times in that fight where he was going backwards too consistently to generate any kind of threat, and he was really up against it for a while. The only shame is, I think we've mentioned it. He actually landed the best punch of the fight, and I thought he backed up Dubois pretty well. And Dubois is the kind of guy who was so determined to come forward all the time that when he got hit, he's going backwards so subtly, but so obviously that you just got his attention. You just kind of hurt him. So Joshua goes in there for the kill and walks into a big punch and gets dropped again, and that was the end of the fight. So it does, but that's also gonna for the Joshua brigade. That's also gonna give you that, oh man, he was maybe possibly gonna start turning things around. He's a veteran. You're left with what if. Because again, Joshua has that kind of effect on you as a fan, and so you still have that. Oh man, now. Should he retire or shouldn't he retire? Because, man, maybe he was going to turn it around. Dubois is known to kind of fade, right? So maybe what if Joshua would have got through it and Dubois' quick start would have made him start to fade? You start to think all these things. But that's boxing, man, and they don't fight every month like they used to. So now we're stuck with that result, and we're stuck with that result for a while. They don't, we're going to be stuck with that result if he doesn't fight or until the next time he fights. Which, again, like the 50s where they used to fight every day.
I think we are both saying about Joshua, it's a superstar effect. The guy's a superstar. Like when he fights when he fights wherever, but you fight at Wembley Stadium, this guy, he's an absolute superstar. So when you see that flash come back, you're like, oh, he's back, man, because it's fun to have a guy like that at the heavyweight division. But Dubois really put on a fantastic performance. He came out jabbing. Like it was a very impressive performance from Dubois. He was not going to be denied that night, and that's why we got the result that we got.
It's funny, guys. I want to make one more note. I was seeing Tyson Bruno highlights recently. I don't know. It came up on my feed on Instagram, and it made me think of Joshua and Dubois in that way because Bruno is a big guy, big, strong guy, but Tyson was backing him up. And Bruno looks out of his element when he's being backed up. Even though he's such a big, muscle-bound guy, he's a guy who when he's getting backed up, he's kind of awkward. He looks kind of awkward in doing that, right? He's so muscle-bound. And he kind of was out of his element, and Tyson was able to overwhelm him. And I was looking at it, and I'm like, you know what? Dubois and Joshua kind of was like this too, where Joshua's this big muscle-bound guy, but he's getting backed up. And now when he's getting backed up so much, he's kind of out of his element. And
similarly, Tyson comes out with that jab. He had that power jab to back you up. So kind of like how Dubois fought as well. It's good. That's a really good comparison.
I remember some of the critics during Joshua's heyday, when Joshua was in his best days, and there were some critics saying, nah, he's going to be just another Frank Bruno. And I didn't buy into it. Because also, I don't want to criticize Frank Bruno either. Frank Bruno had a pretty good career, man. He did become world champion. He did fight the best. He was in some very good fights, and he's a very likable guy. So I don't want to even say that as a criticism, but people were using it as a criticism, like he's not going to get to that upper echelon level. He's championship, but he's not like superstar level. And I was like, nah, man. I think he's a little bit better than Bruno, But in the Dubois fight, it did sort of look like Tyson and Bruno. But then again, this is also a past his prime Joshua.
When you look at guys coming back, guys making something out of their careers, guys surprising everyone, you got to go with Angelo Leo, our own ProBox TV Angelo Leo, guy who had fought on our air to rebuild his world championship status, ends up getting a massive knockout against Luis Alberto Lopez. That was in Albuquerque. Talk about the hometown curse. This guy was motivated by the hometown, got a great knockout in what was a very close fight. People who don't know, it was 85-86 on every single judge's scorecard. They had it, mixed around 2-1, but very close fight. Leo gets the left hook knockout. Chris, when you look at fights in which we were a little bit emotionally invested, we like Angelo Leo. We interviewed with him, sat down with him. Great to see him get that in a competitive fight. This wasn't out of nowhere, Chris.
No, I was on the call for this fight as well. Yep. Two of the upsets of the year.
You're good luck or bad luck. I don't know which is which.
Well, I mean, I was an Angelo Leo fan, so probably good luck. But so this was a fantastic fight, incredible coming out for Angelo Leo, and we had him on our air. So Angelo Leo was off. For people who don't know his backstory, he was off for 2.5 years. He had been a world champion. He had lost a very close fight to Stephen Fulton, which was a barn burner. They threw like 1,000 punches. It was a great fight. And then he disappears for a couple years. He has some issues with legal stuff, managerial stuff, promotional stuff, but stays in the gym, stays working, get ready for his comeback. Makes his comeback on ProBox TV. Has 3 fights on our air. then gets a title shot. Now, we saw him develop right in front of our eyes, Jimmy. We called all 3 of those fights, and we're like, this guy's really good. Like this, I remember the first fight we had, I go, this is the best fighter we've ever had, highest level fighter we've ever had on ProBox. I said it right there, and sure enough, he kept progressing, kept getting better. He gets this shot, and I remember thinking, I'm like, of course he gets it against Venado. He's such a tricky, tough fighter, and I thought he was the guy in the division. And as I'm breaking down this fight, preparing for the call, getting used to everything, watching a lot of video, seeing the things that each guy does, because that's what you do as an analyst, getting ready for a fight, to call a fight. I'm seeing things. I'm like, there are things Leo does that could really give Venado trouble. And I even said it on the air that night, the left hook. I said the left hook of Angelo Leo's got a lot of power. He throws it in a specific way. And because of the defensive flaws that Venado has, getting very high on his punches, jumping and lunging into shots because he's a shorter guy, hands down all the time, has his chin way up there. I'm like, there's going to be positions that Leo could take advantage of. And sure enough, did he. Man, great fight up until that point. Leo stayed very, very disciplined, was landing good jabs, good right hands, came out boxing. He was looking for that left hook, looking to set it up. Venado was doing what Venado does, jumping all over the place, landing big hooks, very, very aggressive. But man, talk about fighting in your hometown and coming prepared. I talked to his team. New Mexico, Albuquerque is elevation. They went to higher elevation to prepare for that night. Venado trained to base at sea level. The preparation was elite for Angelo Leo, and that's why, among other things, he's now a two-division, two-time world champion.
When you look at this fight, Paulie, is it knockout of the year? Not only a big upset, big knockout. Is it one of the best of the year, if not number one to you? Beautiful hook.
No, I think that this fight is one of those fights that's in contention both for upset of the year and knockout of the year, because it's a double shock. When you get an upset that's that big and it's also a huge knockout, and a lot of these upsets tend to be like that, right? A lot of these upsets, it's a guy who's not supposed to win and he catches the guy and he knocks him out. But actually, Leo, like Chris was saying, Leo is actually a very good fighter. And Champ, you made a great point. We noticed his progression on ProBox. He was getting better and better. You actually reminded me of I'm gonna date myself. You guys are gonna know the movie with Bloodsport when Frank Dukes comes in the arena and the Asian guy that's always betting on the fights, he goes to Dukes and he goes, "You good, you good," and he keeps like touching him on the chest awkwardly, before
Dukes is my man. I remember it. We all remember it.
Yeah, you good, and it was like an awkward moment, like you good, you good.
You're more articulate than that.
I feel like that's talking about Leo, right. Yo, he's good. We kept seeing him. We're like, this guy's good, and he gets the big upset in an exclamation point fashion with that KO, and it always has more effect when it's that kind of stoppage on an upset. There's different kind of stoppages as well, but when you get that big one punch shot, that big one punch knockout type of shot, and it's also a huge upset, it makes a statement. And I'm going to give a honorable mention along that line to Lucas Body and knocking out Ashton Silva. It's the same kind of thing except it's not a world title fight, so I didn't have the importance of the Leo knockout. But again, it's a shock upset, and it's by shock knockout, and those kind of things. That's why we talk about them. That's why we're here discussing them.
That's why there's so much fun. That was 2024, a year full of fantastic upsets. We'll keep them rolling in 2025. Download the ProBox TV app. Never fall behind in your boxing news or your boxing upsets. We'll see you next year. For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.